Hello, and welcome to another teaching by 119 Ministries. Our ministry teaches that the whole Bible is still true and directly relevant in our lives. If you would like to know more on what we believe and teach, please visit us at testeverything.net. We hope that you enjoy studying and testing the following teaching. Tithing, a hot topic for many, but should it be? We find it interesting how that the majority of ministers today say that the law is no longer for us to follow. Yet, they are quick to say how you should still pay your tithes, all the while knowing that tithing is straight from the law, the very thing they say we no longer have to follow. Yet, this particular instruction, well, it still applies. So, let's address the big question right off the bat. Does tithing still apply today? The big answer? No, it doesn't. It is generally believed that the tithing system was set up for the Levites and the priests. And this is true, in part. As we will find in this teaching, there were other tithes that were not designated to go to the priests in general. Scripturally speaking, there are basically 4 types of tithes: the Levitical tithe, the festival tithe, the poor tithe, and the priest's tithe. We will go over these with a basic understanding of them, but it must be understood from the beginning that all tithes were intended for either the priests, Levites, or simply brought to the temple for other purposes. Since there are no priests, Levites, or temple in existence today, biblically speaking, you can't tithe, in obedience to the command anyway. This is not to say that one can't willingly give 10% to a ministry, or even split it up among several ministries. It simply means that one cannot obey these instructions as directed in the Scriptures. Ministers have no biblical foundation to say that the paying of tithes has been transferred and is now to be paid to the modern church. Yet, still, many ministers today will tell you that you are sinning by not obeying and giving tithes to the church. But again, no one can tithe as instructed in the Scriptures. It's literally impossible. Let's look at the 4 basic types of tithes as given in the Scriptures and see why. First, the Levitical tithe. This is given by all Israel to the Levites. Numbers 18. I give to the Levites all the tithes in Israel as their inheritance in return for the work they do while serving at the tent of meeting. From now on, the Israelites must not go near the tent of meeting, or they will bear the consequences of their sin and will die. It is the Levites who are to do the work at the tent of meeting and bear the responsibility for offenses against it. This is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. They will receive no inheritance among the Israelites. Instead, I give to the Levites as their inheritance the tithes that the Israelites present as an offering to Yahweh. That is why I said concerning them, they will have no inheritance among the Israelites. Then we have the festival tithe. This is the tithe that is actually set apart for you. Yes, you heard that right. For you. We don't hear pastors talking about this tithe, do we? It's designed to make sure that you have what you need for you and your friends at the festivals, the feast days, to basically throw a big party. Seriously, to have a big feast celebrating the holy days. The instructions for this tithe are that one is to take their tithe to where the temple will be, which became Jerusalem, and celebrate the festivals there with their tithes. If they lived too far away from where the temple was, they were to sell their tithe, take the money they made from it and go to the city where the temple was, and then spend that money on the provisions needed for the festival. Compare Deuteronomy chapter 14. Be sure to set aside a tenth of all that your fields produce each year. Eat the tithe of your grain, new wine and oil, and the firstborn of your herds and flocks, in the presence of Yahweh your God, at the place He will choose as a dwelling for His name, so that you may learn to revere Yahweh your God always. But if that place is too distant and you have been blessed by Yahweh your God and cannot carry your tithe, because the place where Yahweh will choose to put His name is so far away, then exchange your tithe for silver, and take the silver with you, and go to the place Yahweh your God will choose. Use the silver to buy whatever you like, cattle, sheep, wine, or other fermented drink, or anything you wish. Then you and your household shall eat there in the presence of Yahweh your God, and rejoice. And do not neglect the Levites living in the towns, for they have no allotment or inheritance of their own. It is during these feast days in which the Israelites go to that the men are to appear before the Lord, and they are not to appear empty-handed. Compare Deuteronomy 16. 3 times a year all your men must appear before Yahweh your God at the place He will choose, at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacles. No man should appear before Yahweh empty-handed. Each of you must bring a gift in proportion to the way that Yahweh your God has blessed you. If you notice here in verse 17, they are not required to bring a tithe before the Lord here, but rather give a gift in proportion to how they were blessed. This is also mentioned in verse 10, Deuteronomy 16:10. Then celebrate the Feast of Weeks to Yahweh your God by giving a freewill offering in proportion to the blessings that Yahweh your God has given you. From here, we have what is referred to as the poor tithe. These are the provisions that were given to those in need. Deuteronomy 14. At the end of every 3 years, bring all the tithes of that year's produce and store it in your towns, so that the Levites who have no allotment or inheritance of their own, and the aliens, the fatherless, and the widows who live in your towns may come and eat and be satisfied, and so that Yahweh your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. It is again referred to in chapter 26. When you have finished setting aside a tenth of all your produce in the 3rd year, the year of the tithe, you shall give it to the Levite, the alien, the fatherless, and the widow, so that they may eat in your towns and be satisfied. From there we have the priest tithe. These tithes were to be paid by the Levites and went to the priests. Consider Numbers chapter 18. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Levites and say to them, when you receive from the Israelites the tithe I give you as your inheritance, you must present a tenth of that tithe as the Lord's offering. Your offering will be reckoned to you as grain from the threshing floor or juice from the winepress. In this way, you also will present an offering to Yahweh from all the tithes you receive from the Israelites. From these tithes you must give Yahweh's portion to Aaron the priest. You must present as Yahweh's portion the best and holiest part of everything given to you. Say to the Levites, when you present the best part, it will be reckoned to you as the product of the threshing floor or the winepress. You and your households may eat the rest of it anywhere, for it is your wages for your work at the tent of meeting. By presenting the best part of it, you will not be guilty in this matter. Then you will not defile the holy offerings of the Israelites, and you will not die." The Levites and priests were set apart for their position when Moses first received the instructions from Yahweh. Because of this position, They were not given land as the other tribes were. Deuteronomy 18. The priests who are Levites, indeed the whole tribe of Levi, are to have no allotment or inheritance with Israel. They shall live on the offerings made to Yahweh by fire, for that is their inheritance. They shall have no inheritance among their brothers. Yahweh is their inheritance, as He promised them. They were allowed cities, but not territories. They had 48 cities within the other tribes' territories. Numbers 35. In all, you must give the Levites 48 towns together with their pasture lands. The Levites were given the tithes in return for their work in the temple. The tithes they received were livestock, grains, and fruit, and the tithe was to be the best of what you had. Along this line, one could substitute their tithe with money instead, but they were actually charged 20% for doing so. Compare Leviticus 27. And all the tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or of the fruit of the tree, is Yahweh's. It is holy to Yahweh. If a man wants at all to redeem any of his tithes, he shall add 1/5 to it. And concerning the tithe of the herd or the flock, of whatever passes under the rod, the 10th one shall be holy to Yahweh. He shall not inquire whether it is good or bad, nor shall he exchange it. And if he exchanges it at all, then both it and the one exchanged for it shall be holy. It shall not be redeemed. These are the commands which Yahweh commanded Moses for the children of Israel on Mount Sinai. There are two ways of interpreting this. One, if you choose to redeem your tithe, you are to add 1/5 of the total value to the tithe. Thus, it would go from 10% to 30% because of adding 1/5, which is adding 20%. Or two, if you choose to redeem your tithe, you are to add 1/5 of the value of the tithe. 1/5 of 10% is 2%, thus resulting in 12% of being what is to be paid as a result of paying in the form of money. Either of these two interpretations could be correct, depending on one's view of the Hebrew text. However, the point here is simply that there was a penalty for paying in the form of money, instead of that which came from the crops, flocks, or herds. A general understanding is that all male Levites were or became priests, but this is not so. Only the descendants of Aaron were the priests. They were indeed Levites, but only they were to be priests. However, the rest of the male Levites were to be servants for the priests. Compare Exodus 28. After you put these clothes on, your brother Aaron and his sons anoint and ordain them. Consecrate them so they may serve me as priests. And verse 43. Aaron and his sons must wear them whenever they enter the tent of meeting or approach the altar to minister in the holy place, so that they will not incur guilt and die. This is to be a lasting ordinance for Aaron and his descendants. Again, it says for Aaron and his descendants. Exodus 29. And put headbands on them. Then tie sashes on Aaron and his sons. The priesthood is theirs by a lasting ordinance. In this way you shall ordain Aaron and his sons. Exodus 29. So I will consecrate the tent of meeting and the altar, and will consecrate Aaron and his sons to serve me as priests. Leviticus chapter 6. Give Aaron and his sons this command. These are the regulations for the burnt offering. The burnt offerings is to remain on the altar hearth throughout the night till morning, and the fire must be kept burning on the altar. Leviticus 7. This is the portion of the offerings made to Yahweh by fire that were allotted to Aaron and his sons on the day they were presented to serve Yahweh as priests. Leviticus 21. Yahweh said to Moses, Speak to the priests, the sons of Aaron, and say to them, A priest must not make himself ceremonially unclean for any of his people who die. Numbers 18. Yahweh said to Aaron, "You, your sons, and your father's family are to bear the responsibility for offenses against the sanctuary, and you and your sons alone are to bear the responsibility for offenses against the priesthood." So it is clear that only the descendants of Aaron are to be priests in the earthly temple. Even Yeshua himself, our high priest in heaven, is forbidden to be priest in the earthly temple. Compare Hebrews chapter 8. If he were on earth, he would not be a priest, for there are already men who offer the gifts prescribed by the law. They serve at a sanctuary that is a copy and shadow of what is in heaven. This is why Moses was warned when he was about to build a tabernacle. See to it that you make everything according to the pattern shown you on the mountain. Again, the earthly priesthood is set apart only for the descendants of Aaron. The rest of the Levites were given to the descendants of Aaron as helpers. Numbers 18. Bring your fellow Levites from your ancestral tribe to join you and assist you when you and your sons minister before the tent of testimony. They are to be responsible to you and are to perform all the duties of the tent. But they must not go near the furnishings of the sanctuary or the altar, or both they and you will die. They are to join you and be responsible for the care of the tent of meeting, all the work at the tent, and no one else may come near where you are. You are to be responsible for the care of the sanctuary and the altar, so that wrath will not fall on the Israelites again. I myself have selected your fellow Levites from among the Israelites as a gift to you, dedicated to Yahweh, to do the work at the tent of meeting. But only you and your sons may serve as priests in connection with everything at the altar and inside the curtain. I am giving you the service of the priesthood as a gift. Anyone else who comes near the sanctuary must be put to death. This is why we see Korah's rebellion in Numbers 16. Korah was a Levite, yet that obviously wasn't enough for him. Consider Numbers 16. Moses also said to Korah, "Now listen, you Levites, isn't it enough for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the rest of the Israelite community and brought you near himself to do the work at Yahweh's tabernacle and to stand before the community and minister to them? He has brought you and all your fellow Levites near himself, but now you are trying to get the priesthood too. It is against Yahweh that you and all your followers have banded together. Who is Aaron that you should grumble against him?" The problem with Korah's rebellion is that it wasn't only the Levites that joined him. There were others as well. Numbers 16:1. Korah, son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, and certain Reubenites, Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, and On, son of Peleth, became insolent and rose up against Moses. With them were 250 Israelite men, well-known community leaders who had been appointed members of the council. As Moses said, though they were grumbling against Aaron, it was Yahweh who they really were opposing. Though the Levites, who were not from Aaron, were not priests, they still received tithes as their wages. Numbers 18. I give to the Levites all the tithes in Israel as their inheritance in return for the work they do while serving at the tent of meeting. In all of this, it is clear that these tithes went to the priests and to the Levites for their duties in the temple. Nowhere in the Scriptures do we see the tithes transferred from them to pastors or teachers. This is not to say that we cannot help these individuals, for even Paul was assisted by the believers, but these were offerings and not tithes. This must be understood. Again, nowhere in the Scriptures are we directed to pay these tithes to anyone other than as directed regarding the Levites and the priests. There is just no way around it. We do find Paul discussing that we should be cheerful givers and that we reap according to how we sow. 2 Corinthians chapter 9. Remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Each man should give what he has decided in his heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. Giving is something we are encouraged to grow in. 2 Corinthians chapter 8. But just as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in your love for us, see that you also excel in this grace of giving. So, even though biblical tithing is not something we can do today, we can still give to those ministers that spread the eternal gospel like those who supported Paul. But it's not just in supporting ministries.